Decades ago, Peter Drucker came up with a concept called the knowledge worker. So we're going to transition here a little bit. The knowledge worker. And I remember when I read about this the first time, I thought, oh, knowledge worker, what's that? And he said, well, we're shifting away from manual workers and into knowledge workers. So people aren't sitting around anymore, just making brake parts for cars. Now we're doing things like being managers and building these technical systems and becoming architects. And as our culture becomes more successful and we all have food and housing and all of these other things, our abilities can be put to use meeting our higher needs. Well, it's become a trend, became a tidal wave, and now almost everyone, almost all the people in this room anyway, especially, are knowledge workers. Everyone in Western society almost is a knowledge worker in one way or another. They work with their minds. And what Peter Drucker talked about is that knowledge workers create opportunity, but they also create the potential for some very dangerous downsides in that if you've got someone sitting there making the brake parts, you can come in and you can say, how many brake parts did you make today? And they can say, I made 23 brake parts. And you can look over at the next person and go, how many brake parts did you make? And they say, I made 27 brake parts. And you can look at the next person and how many brake parts? I made 25. How many brake parts? I made 4. Something's wrong. Knowledge workers, it's not so easy because you can't look at their brake parts all the time. Knowledge work, as Peter Drucker says, is defined by results. Knowledge work is defined by the result that it creates. And so the ability to find stars who are great knowledge workers that can not only work with knowledge but then turn it into results is a little bit bigger challenge. And this undergirds or underpins the importance even more of finding stars, of learning how to recognize when someone just is a star. That's who they are, is a star. And they have these qualities that we're going to talk about outside of, I type 47 words per minute, and I am trained in Microsoft Office and whatever else, but the intrinsic motivation and the aspirations and the abilities and all these kinds of the passion, that stuff. Brad Smart, who wrote the book Top Grading, who I mentioned before, probably the smartest guy maybe that's ever lived in the area of recruiting and interviewing and hiring. He talks about this notion of A players, B players, and C players. And he says some interesting things about C players, and the more I've thought about it, the more I've looked around at it, I went, wow, he really gets something here. A C player, right, an underperformer, someone that's just not right for that role, maybe a not intrinsically motivated person who's not in it for the excellence and to be great. C players not only don't perform, they don't not only deliver results that are poor, but they also turn A players into B players and C players. And they are like A player repellent. If an A player comes into your business and looks around and sees a bunch of C players, it's like, that is not where I want to be. And in fact, I've watched in our own business as we've gone through, many different cycles and ups and downs, and we've had our challenges. I mean, this has been quite a ride so far, and I'm sure it's only going to get more interesting. But when there's a C player interacting with some A players, the drama is just unbelievable. The A players are freaking out. They're like, this person's not performing. Like, we got to do something. This is a bottleneck. They're in our way. We can't get stuff done. So be very careful, because if you hire someone that's a C player and you bring them on your team or you keep them, they're going to turn A players into B and C players, and they're going to scare away the other A players. So this is a little bit of an all or nothing. Does that make sense to say a little bit of an all or nothing thing? That didn't quite line up right there. But you might consider this, you might turn up the all or nothing dial on this one and really make a commitment to just go for stars. That's it. That's my commitment. Only stars. Another interesting thing about stars that I've found is that stars multiply each other. You remember I mentioned in the example before, I used the example of, to me, one type of profit is if you put 2 stars together and they work together long enough that they get that broadband connection and they know how to work together. They have it. And now they've got the ball and they can work as a team. That can be profit all by itself. Well, if you take one star and you connect them to another star, I don't think you just get 2x. I think this is a 1 + 1 = 3 effect. But then, if you introduce another star into the mix and you connect it up, well, then something very interesting happens. Because now the 3 turns into like 6. And it's almost as if you're invoking the network effect. And they're having a multiplying effect on each other. And when you keep stacking one star on top of another, and then putting them together and turning them loose so that they can interact with each other and they can get to know each other and they can find out each other's strengths, each other's weaknesses, they can fill in the gaps for each other, they can communicate well, and then they start connecting up with each other. It is an amazing and beautiful thing to see happening. I read an article, I don't know, a year ago or so, about MySpace, which is kind of one of these internet massive successes. And it was by one of the founders, and he said something in the article kind of offhanded, and as soon as I saw it, I said, there we go. And what he said is, the management team at MySpace, we had worked together for 8 years before MySpace came along. And it just turned out that one of their little web properties over here, some guy put up this little networking site based around music to promote his band or something, and built it and kind of took off, and they went, hey, let's be smart enough to know we're getting lucky. And they went over there and they said, let's pay attention to this thing. And they took their management team that had been working together for 8 years, and they blew up the opportunity. So I believe that stars amplify each other. I think that they multiply each other's power. And there's a little bit of the network effect that happens when they do that. So the qualities of a star, in my view, are number one, they're a driver. Driver. This is the most important quality of a star, in my opinion. It's also a quality that you don't see talked about in hiring books, interviewing books, especially not the way that I'm going to talk about it here. If you think of this spectrum or this continuum here, and on this end we have what I call a passive, I want to write this down, passive, aggressive, reactive, and this whole zone over here is the reactive zone. And then over on this end of the spectrum, we have what I call a driver. And this would be the proactive zone. If you've ever heard me talk about this, a passive-aggressive reactive person, this is the most difficult and annoying type to deal with if you're a successful entrepreneur, is the person that not only needs to be extrinsically motivated and techniqued and forced into doing what they need to do, but they're resistant about it. They're passive-aggressive. And the example that I like to use is just about any person that I've met working in any department of motor vehicles office, for some reason, it's that attitude of, yes, I realize that we told you that there was no wait when you called, and yes, I realize you've been sitting here for 2.5 hours, but I'm going to have this job until they put me in the box, and there's nothing you can do about it. And if you even hint, if you even try to push me, I will lose your paperwork, and you will be hosed. You know that great feeling you get when you run into that person? That's the passive-aggressive reactive. It's the extreme end. Hopefully you don't have any of those, although a lot of businesses do. Anybody ever met one of those? You know what I'm talking about? Okay, good. And then this is the reactive zone, anywhere from kind of right in the middle on the balance over to passive-aggressive reactive. These are reactive folks. They need to have someone tell them what to do so that they can react to it. My estimate is this is 80 to 90% of people that I meet in business. 80 to 90%. It's not scientific, just my own personal estimate. 80 to 90%. Which means that only 10 to 20% of people are proactive, which means they show up and they say to you, I'm done with that other thing, what can I do next? I've been experiencing someone who's a very proactive person on my team for the last several days here, and that's Den. Those binders that you're looking at and the beautiful designs that you're seeing there, Den and Farmer have been doing some amazing work there, but you have Den largely to thank for creating all that design. And one of the things that's amazing about Den is that at these breaks, I'm back behind the stage hiding and getting ready for the next thing, and Den is finding me and saying, is there anything else you need? Is there anything else? Figuring out how to slip in between the cracks to give me a quick update. We've got that other thing done. Behind the scenes, we've got this. What can I do next? Proactive. I actually have to say to Den sometimes, just find something to do for a few minutes. That's what you want. You want someone that's so proactive that you actually have to say to them on a regular basis, just go keep yourself busy, do some other stuff, take a break, have a Coke. I wish I could tell Den to take a break during this program, but we got a lot of work to do. A driver is someone who takes personal responsibility for things. They have a sense of personal responsibility. They also have a sense of a result instead of work, right? So instead of just effort and time, whatever, it's the result we're trying to get to. Remember I said Peter Drucker says knowledge work is defined by the result? Well, drivers, they just somehow intuitively get that. This is all about the result. And when you put those two together, you get this kind of abstract thing called owning the result. They own the result. And you can feel them owning the result. They just say, well, what are we trying to do? And then they say, okay, I got it. I got the ball. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to deliver that result. And you realize that the monkey has climbed onto their back and they've got it. And they're like, we're in this until the job is done. I got the ball on this one. You'll know pretty quickly when you hire someone if they're a driver or not, if you interact with them. One of the things that I recommend, we'll talk a little bit about later, is get daily updates from people when they start, watch how they communicate, interact with you. If someone hasn't proven to you that they're a driver within the first 30 days, you probably made a bad choice. You should probably suck it up, say thank you very much, and get on to the next thing. You need someone that finishes things up and shows back up and says, okay, what's next? And that takes personal responsibility for delivering a result. Very important. Another quality that I look for, personal and professional aspirations. You can find out if someone has aspirations by asking them, where do you want to be in a year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years? My favorite question is, where do you want to be in a year, 3 years, 5 years? To get a few data points so I can see the curve of what their aspirations are. If you just ask someone, where do you want to be in a year, 3 years, 5 years? It will tell you so much, because what a lot of people, most people will answer is, well, I'd like to be making at least 50,000 in a year, and in 3 years I'd like to be at 65, And at 5 years, wow, if I could be at 75,000 in 5 years, that would be great. Now, is that someone that has aspirations? They're there, right? They aspire to a high level, but just think about what they're saying. The type of person that I look for is the person that says, well, in a year, what I'd like to do is have learned enough so I could manage my own team, so that in 3 years, I could start my own company and then do this whole thing. And then in 5 years, I want to be at $100 million. Now, that might be a little bit too type E entrepreneur, but that's my kind of person, right? Someone that sees how strategically, how the different steps that they're taking are going to be fitting into the future. And they're talking about things that they want to learn, skills that they want to get, how they want to work with other people. One of the things that you'll find with stars is that learning and development is more important than money. Far more important, in fact, because their stars think long term. And they know that if they just take money and they don't learn anything, that they're going to wake up in 5 years and not be able to make more money. So they want the learning. They want to develop. I mentioned emotional and social intelligence. It's not important for all roles, but I'm just throwing that out there. They're going to interact with a lot of other people, and sometimes you've got a function in your business where it's just a person who is super introverted and they just need to kind of be alone doing their thing. Maybe it's some computer programming role and they don't really need to deal with other people that much and they can communicate with other super technology, friendly people. Fine, they can be a star. But if you're going to grow a big successful company, they're probably going to have to interact with other people. And it may not be a problem now, but later down the road, it will manifest and you'll realize. The next one that I talk about that it's a little unusual, it's a little weird to describe, but I call it millionaire next door sensibilities. Thomas Stanley wrote the book several years ago called The Millionaire Next Door. And what he did is he kind of blew open this idea. Most of us think of millionaires as a millionaire is someone that lives a lavish lifestyle and lives in a big mansion up on the hill and drives a fancy car and goes out every night and is like, in People magazine in the socialite section. And what Thomas Stanley found out is that's not true. Most rich people drive used American, well, in America this is, we've got an international audience here, but drive 10-year-old used American-made cars, and they live in old established neighborhoods in modest homes, and they dress conservatively. And this is most people that have a lot of money. And when I was a little younger, I was always impressed by people that were flashy, and I wanted to someday be able to be successful so I could be flashy too. And I went through a couple of little phases where I was a little bit more flashy. But I started realizing that people that are super flashy, that's what they're in it for, are often very much big hat, no cattle types. That there's really nothing inside there. They don't really have the goods, so to speak. And that a star often doesn't broadcast it and say, I am the best you are ever going to meet. They just deliver results. They love doing it. They get the job done. And in a lot of cases, these are very family-oriented people. I mean, you can't discriminate based on familial status, and you wouldn't want to do that, but I've just noticed that they're very connected to their families. It's an important thing to have good relationships with families, friends. They're just in it for the long haul. And so they do things like save. They think about their career strategically, where they're going to get to the next level. And they figure out how to make the thing that they're doing now a win for the long run. Now, spending all the money that you're making on flashy things and going and leasing a really expensive car because that's all the car payment that you've got instead of just buying the less expensive one for cash. If a person's going to do that themselves, how do you think they're going to behave with your money? How do you think they're going to make decisions? So I call it millionaire next door sensibilities because that's the best way I have of describing it. And I've got a lot of friends that are, people that are younger than me, even people I've known in their late teen years who I just say, you are going to be a success rock star in your future, I can tell, because you're staying lean and you're staying conservative and you're making money and you're growing, but you're not just going out and blowing it immediately. You're just being cool with it. You're doing it to learn how to do it and how to get it. So if someone's flashy, be careful. Be very careful. And if someone is not all that impressive, when you meet them and you're not like, wow, this is the coolest person I've ever met, don't kind of discount them. Say, let's see what the work looks like. I read that Robert Half talks about making the mistake of thinking that a good interviewer will be a good worker. Interviewing well is a skill. Producing results is a skill. They are not the same skill. They are very, very different. Another thing that Warren Buffett said, he said it's simple. I work with people that I like, admire, and trust. I like, admire, and trust. Ask people what they're not good at. I like to ask people, so what are some of the things you're not that good at? What are your weaknesses? And then listen and pay careful attention. Listen between the words. If you say, what's your weakness? My favorite response is, well, I guess I'd just have to say that I'm too much of a perfectionist. You mean you don't have any weaknesses, no problems? You don't screw a particular type of thing up over and over and over? I don't think so. Danger. And another thing that I look for that is, I've never seen this mentioned anywhere, but it seems so obvious, it took me years to figure this one out, is work with people that love business. I didn't say that love money, I said that love business. That see business as a fun game to play, a place where they can develop, create results, work with other great people, evolve. And I like to ask questions like, what do you like about business? I know it's a profound one, right? Asking someone, what do you like about business, will tell you a lot. Most people will say something, never really thought about that. Well, I guess I like having a steady job. I like that about business. Some people are very interested in business. They're fascinated by it. They love figuring out all the models and all the paradigms and how things work. And I think that those are the people that you want to find. People that love and really enjoy business. Here's what I'd like you to do. Put a star next to the idea that you got that you can implement immediately. Maybe even write down a little one-line action plan. So you should be looking at this document, your star profile. The key traits to look for when recruiting stars for your team aren't typically mentioned in books and trainings on interviewing and hiring. Some of these traits include being a driver, being highly networked, being emotionally and socially intelligent, having millionaire next-door sensibilities, having passion and aspirations, having a strong personal passion about business. In addition to these traits, identify any other traits and qualifications needed for the specific role you're considering. What I'd like you to do right now is to just take a few minutes and ask yourself, what are some traits that you should describe explicitly, that you should say out loud, that you should make part of the dialogue inside of your business? What are the traits that you're looking for in another person that are musts? You have to have them if you're going to hire them. What are those traits? And create what I call your star profile. I've given you some of ours, the most important ones. Maybe you have a few to add. And then, in the box below, if you're thinking of a particular role, you can add some more specific traits to that box. So you've got your general traits you'll use for everyone, and then you've got your specific traits. So your general traits, you might take 3 or 4 from our list, from our star profile, and you might add a couple of more. One of your traits might be they just have to be super outgoing and friendly, because everyone in your business is, and everything you're ever going to do is going to involve that, so they must be unbelievably gregarious and social. Maybe that's just one of your star profile traits, has to be that way. Or maybe you're looking to hire someone that has, very specialized technical expertise and experience, and they need to have a few specific traits that are musts. And it's a good idea to write those down so that you've explicitly said them and you know what you're looking for. So take about 5 minutes right now and just brainstorm through your mind and say, okay, where have I made mistakes? Where have I learned some lessons? What are some things that I need to avoid in the future? What are the traits that I need to find in a star? And make yourself a little star profile. Even if you steal our traits and you just rewrite them and you pick the ones that you like, I'd like you to make a commitment to yourself and to your business that you're only going to hire stars and that you're only going to hire people that have these traits. Okay, make that commitment to yourself. We'll take a few minutes with this exercise. Go.